I started my very own philosophical science fiction and fantasy magazine. I'm super excited about this. It's called Sages, Mages, and Wisdom Machines, Finding Truth and Wisdom Through Science Fiction and Fantasy. This is kind of like my own pulp science fiction magazine. They called them pulps because the paper was really pulpy and really cheap, and that's how they could afford to print them and sell them for kind of cheap. The paper on these ones is actually really quality, but it's got the same kind of old school pulp feel because it's a booklet and it has the two staples on the side. I am just so excited about this. I've been writing science fiction and fantasy stories for a long time, but I've been publishing them publicly for about a year and a half now. I started a sub-theme on my Substack called Sages, Mages, and Wisdom Machines about a year and a half ago, where I would publish philosophical science fiction and theological fantasy stories to help you guys better understand philosophy and theology through reading stories. I think Plato discovered this way long ago, that telling a kind of story is one of the best ways to inculcate philosophical ideas, and doing it through a dialogue is the best way to see both sides in action. So here's a thought, and then here's a counterpoint, and then here's a counterpoint to the counterpoint, and eventually we get to the truth. So many science fiction authors knew this. They were incognito philosophers, just teaching their philosophy through their novels and short stories, and it took me a long time to realize wrapping philosophy in a story is one of the best modes of communication. So I started publishing my science fiction and fantasy stories in order to help you understand philosophy and theology, and I published it on my Substack. Eventually that grew so much that I moved my short stories over to their own Substack publication called Sages, Mages, and Wisdom Machines. So now I have two Substack publications, and that was kind of functioning as a digital pulp magazine. And that's cool, but it wasn't as satisfying as having a physical thing, something to read and look over and maybe even mark up if you're a marginalia person, if you take marginal notes. So then I was reminded of zines, personal magazines. I read a really great Substack piece, and they were arguing, the young lady was arguing, hey, you should turn your Substack into a zine, into a physical publication, physical magazine. And so I asked my audience, hey, would you guys like that? Would you guys be up for buying a physical magazine if I were to put one out? And the resounding answer was yes. So many people on Substack and on YouTube and all of my various platforms that I use, everyone kept saying yes. And so I even put out a couple polls and said, hey, say yes if you would. A bunch of people said yes. And so I pulled the trigger. I shopped around. I went to 3 or 4 different printers. Most of them were not very good, but then I found one that was super good, super awesome, and I had them print up an initial 25, and these are actually all sold out. So I started an Etsy page called Parker Zines. You can find a link in the description. These are all spoken for. I will sign these initial 20 that I'm selling. I'm holding back 5, and then those folks are also going to get Sages, Mages, and Wisdom Machine stickers in addition. So if you guys are interested in this, then you can check out the link in the description for the next pre-order. I'm going to order a bunch of them, and the more I order, the cheaper they will be to produce and the cheaper I can sell them for. So I would love to get like 1,000 of these going. That would be huge. So check that link in the description or the pinned comment and pre-order your own copy of issue number 1 of Sages, Mages, and Wisdom Machines. Now you may be asking, what's in here? What am I going to get for my money? Well, there are 4 short stories. They are science fiction and fantasy stories with philosophical themes in there. And then I also included a behind the curtain section for each one of the short stories. In the behind the curtain section, it's basically a philosophical essay to help you explore the themes that I put inside of each story. So in case you missed them, or in case you missed a couple Easter eggs, I will explain those in a short little essay after the short story. So that way you can learn philosophy and maybe a little bit of theology along the way. I'm also including 2 of my fantasy poems, and each one of those has a behind the curtain section as well. And then I'm also including 2 philosophical science fiction essays. One is comparing and contrasting J.R.R. Tolkien's view of power with Frank Herbert's view of power. So we're going to compare and contrast Lord of the Rings and Dune. And another is an analysis of the TV show Severance and why it is good science fiction according to C.S. Lewis's categories for science fiction. So I really like and admire the science fiction magazine Analog, Science Fiction, Science Fact. They include science fact essays in their magazine. They initially did that so that parents would feel okay buying their children a fantasy science fiction magazine. And the kid could say, hey, look, Mom, Dad, buy me this magazine because I'll learn actual science, not only in the short stories themselves, but there's all these factoids in the essays as well. So I'll learn about traveling to the moon and all sorts of stuff like that. I actually really like that. So that's why I included some philosophical essays in here. So I'm pulling from both of my Substacks, putting them all in my first issue of my own science fiction magazine. There are 60 pages in here. There's also an advertisement for my forthcoming science fiction novel. So that's kind of fun with some never before seen artwork. There are 10 original pieces from artists that I've commissioned to make pictures for each one of my short stories and poems. So that's that. I'm really excited about this. This will be super fun. So if that sounds fun to you guys, then definitely check the link in the description. You can also read more of my stuff on my Parker's Fiction Substack. It's the Sages and Mages one, but find that link in the description, and then you can see some more of my science fiction philosophical essays over on Parker's Ponderings, my other Substack. So if you can't tell, I'm super excited about this. This is such a fun project. It was really cool editing this. It was really cool pulling from a lot of the work I've already done. I know so many of you are like me, and you can read digital stuff, but you much prefer the analog paper and ink style of reading. You really like the codex form of the book that opens in half. That's how I am too. So maybe some of you have already read these stories, but you would prefer to read them in the physical copy. That's awesome. Maybe you just want to support your boy. That would be huge as well. Hopefully this is just issue 1 of like a bunch more issues, like 100 or 200. I would love to keep doing this as long as I have breath in my lungs. So in the future, I will be serializing my novel, Block World, in this magazine, along with my digital version over on my Substack. And I will be writing a whole bunch of short stories. And I'm also looking to get some short stories from others. So I already have one short story from Christopher Rocchio that you can read up on my Substack right now. But I'm looking to get a few more from him in the future that will be exclusive, probably just for the magazine or behind a paywall on Substack. And then it would be really fun to solicit some articles from my philosopher friends who like science fiction, or even other short stories from authors that I like. So far, you guys have been super awesome about this. You've been really supportive. A bunch of you have already bought these initial copies, and even more of you have put in for a pre-order. So make sure you get your pre-orders in by September 28th, 2025, so I know how many to order. I'll order a bunch more so that I have some in stock in case you're seeing this after September 8th, 2025. But if you could, please order faster, sooner than later, so that I know I should order 300 instead of 50 or whatever the case. All right, that's going to do it for now. I'll catch you guys next time.